All right, I guess we'll get started this morning. I welcome you all to this seminar this morning. Lee Briese came to us from North Dakota, and Lee got both his bachelor's and master's degree from North Dakota State University. His master's was in soil science. I don't know what is about almost 4 years ago, probably a little over 3 years ago, I guess I first met Lee, or maybe it was 4.
Close.
I think it was 4 that I met him at an NAICC meeting, and we kicked around the idea about the possibility of doing this, and he started to follow it up. And kind of what I've been saying is he's been commuting from North Dakota since, so Lee is a crop consultant in North Dakota and has been working on that for probably 20 years now, roughly. And to this topic, I think he brings a fairly significant amount of credibility, even before he started the DPH degree. So I'm looking forward to him talking about the role of the trusted advisor. So Lee, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to try to use a lapel mic, so make sure to turn on, right? See if we got that. Okay, green light, we're good to go. All right, so, uh-oh. Well, we'll do it the old-fashioned way. It's not moving either way. That's not it. Do this.
I have a backup one. If you want me to put that in.
Let's see. There, we got it. Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it. All right, so I am going to say that I'm very pleased to be here today. This is the culmination of a lot of work, and a lot of time, a lot of effort, a few miles. It's about 500 miles back to my home, and I did drive fairly often. I did spend a lot of time away, and it's kind of a normal question to ask somebody after their defense. So what are you going to do now, right, that you got your degree? Well, I'm going to go back to the same job that I've had all along for the same pay. So I want you to ponder that question while I'm doing this presentation. Think about that. Because really, I'm going to do the same thing in the same way. Well, no, I'm not going to do it in the same way, actually. That's why I came here, one of the reasons I came here. So I want to talk about communication, but there's some looming things, right? There's some grand challenges that face all of us in many industries, and particularly in agriculture. And feeding 9 to 10 billion people in 2050 or 51 or whatever that's going to happen is a big one. Climate change is another one that we need to address, right? These are grand challenges. And then sustainability, which we really can't even define appropriately, right? I have to even argue we're having trouble defining global change and how to convince people of that, okay? I think we've come a long way in 80 to 100 years. I think science has moved a long way. This makes my heart ache, photos like this. And since we've come a long way, this doesn't happen anymore, right? It's just so happened to be Earth Day 2015. We were in this field. I wish to say that we've learned. I'd love to say that we've learned. I think we have learned. Now, on both sides of this road here are no-till soybean fields and have been no-till for 10 to 15 years. And yet, I can't see the road more than 100 yards away. I think we have a lot of looming problems, and I don't think they're just climate change. I think sustainability is a really big one. This is the current ATV that I'm riding right now. This happens every year in this field, and it's near the center of the field. And what does he do to manage it? Well, he brings the soil from here and puts it in there because he has to cross that. And on my travels down on Monday from North Dakota to Nebraska, I could have stopped about every 10 miles and taken a similar picture. And these are good farmers, folks. They're good farmers. They're good operators. This is not snow. This is a picture from North Dakota, but it's not snow. This is salt. Primarily gypsum, but also mag sulfate, some calcium chloride. And is devoid of plant life throughout the year. And this is a picture in April when the evaporation is highest. We're not doing a good job managing our water, and these soils are barren. And here's what that looks like from the air in mid-June. This is a soybean field that's not one that we work on. And everywhere that you see this color, there's absolutely no soybean production. Everywhere you see the yellow and the light greens, this is severely limited yield. Where you see the dark green areas, it's pretty good yield. Anybody want to guess at the economics of this field? Does this look like something we can keep doing? And my old friend, whom I've been battling for many years, I actually call this plant job security. So this kochia plant is resistant to at least 4 classes of herbicides. And we know this. This is a given. We know this. And in this situation, the grower says, well, it's not really resistant. If you just put more on, it'll work. So in this case, I can't say the name because he applied 2 gallons per acre glyphosate and 8 gallons of water sprayed at 10 gallons an acre. And he did kill some of them, okay? But not everybody. There's another definition for more on. Okay. These are the things that I'm seeing in my day-to-day operations. This is barley planted. This is kochia. This is the only weed in that picture. And it covers the ground. This will never be harvested. And you speak to the grower that has this land and he says, I did everything I could do. You didn't prevent the kochia from going to seed. Because you can look at this and you can know that a combine will never go through there. So what was the point of leaving those plants to grow? This should have been mowed, managed, something else. Because one kochia plant can have up to 300,000 seeds pretty easily. And when you think about the average corn planting population, right around 30 to 31,000, that's a lot of acres in one kochia plant. Within this picture, you could see down an entire township. So I'm presenting these problems as a justification for what I wrote and for what I want to talk about. Is this happening because we have a lack of solutions? I don't think so. I think we have a lot of solutions for these problems. Soil erosion, we know how to manage soil erosion, don't we? We've been studying it for a long time. As a matter of fact, those first pictures I showed you from the 30s spurred on the government developing a soil conservation service, right? That was part of the reason that happened. Many great scientists have tackled these problems and found many great solutions. So why does this persist? Herbicides are the same thing. Weed management's the same thing. We've been studying this for millennia. We have answers. Why do these problems persist? If you want to talk about some of these later, we'll talk about them at the end, okay? Some of those, the ones in red are like, okay. So where's the weakness? What's the problem? We have the science, we have the tools, we know what to do. Is it communication? Is it application? I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's about bringing it to head, about employing it. I think we've been focused for a long time, and I think in the industry it still is this way. I know specifically within advisors and agronomists, we work on problems. We find a resistant weed, and you talk to the weed scientist or the agronomist, and they want to do tillage. It's a good management tool. There's nothing wrong with that. But then that breeds and leads into erosion. So then we go talk to the soil scientist now that we have an erosion problem, right? And so he's talking about erosion. He says, all right, well, if you reduce your tillage, you can manage your erosion. And granted, these are not the only solutions to these problems, right? I'm not saying that. But this is what happens. And then a corn producer who's growing corn and has Gauss's wilt, leaves on the surface, and now we have all of this inoculum laying on the surface. And this is a major problem. So we talk to the plant pathologist. Now what do I do about Gauss's wilt? Well, you can pick a different variety. That will help. But then does it leave you open to corn rootworm? Does it leave you open to other problems? This is this cycle. We're just on this continuous treadmill. Everything we do has another problem, has another situation. That's life. All the choices we make are compromises. But this problem-based solution is really not getting us anywhere. I think the answers are in complex systems-based solutions. And that's a lot harder because now you have to think about somebody who wants to do no-till, who has Gauss's wilt, who has these problems with the weeds. Now, what are the solutions that fit into that system? So it needs to be customized. It has to fit that solution. It can't be generic. I think that's one of the failings that we have. We have a very strong scientific system. We have a really good extension. But unfortunately, those people are overworked and overcharged, and they can't build these customized solutions for everyone. They do for some and when they can, but the majority of it is a presentation just like this, in a room full of a number of people. And we say, here's the problem that we researched. Here are the solutions that we found. Go forth and fix them. I think that's where the failing is, because that person needs to know how to do it. The other thing that I found in my experiences is that the assessments have to be done firsthand. Your doctor doesn't just write your prescriptions over the phone. You have to go see them. They ask you lots of questions. They ask you questions that you think are unrelated to your problems. There's a reason for that, right? And I have found numerous unreported problems. So not long ago, I had a guy who really wanted to incorporate cover crops into his corn system. One field of corn. He didn't really have a good planter, so he planted with what he had. And we walked into the cornfield, and he's worried about his cover crop establishment. And the first thing I had was like, where's your corn? He planted with an old cyclone planter. And if you're not aware of this, this is from the 70s and 80s kind of technology. It was planted on a windy day, and wind is bad for cyclone planters. So there were gaps in the rows about this. Then there were 3 or 4 plants together. It was not the way to grow corn. And he's worried about the cover crops because that was his focus. And he tunneled in and saw that. The first question I had is, why did you plant it this way? Well, that's the only planter I had. Get somebody else to plant it for you. It's a different solution. But in order to get there, people have to trust. I think trust is paramount. It's the first thing. We don't take advice from people we don't trust. I hope we don't. I hope if you look on the internet, you're skeptical, right? I hope we should all be skeptical. It seems like somebody's trying to sell you something all the time. They'll tell you whatever they want. And therefore, you need knowledge in order to find these problems. We need the knowledge. We need a depth of knowledge to be able to find where the issues are, to see that corn stand is not appropriate, to look into it, to go further, to dig up the roots and take a look. And that also comes with experience. So bring in the trusted advisor of my title. This is a map of the certified crop advisors in North America, the green dots. And my dot is right about there. Okay? There's over 13,000 certified crop advisors across North America. That's a big number. That's an army of individuals who can do this. The thing is, the majority of them do not do direct field visits. A number of them do sales only. Okay? That's not a problem necessarily. But if you're not doing a head-to-toe on your patient assessment, how do you find the problems? How do you identify the problems? How do you do that? So I want to challenge this group in particular to up their game one level, to bring it up a notch, to do those investigations. So I've listed some of the trusted advisors that I found in my literature review that are supported. Now these are professionals, and I added the last one because it didn't really come up. But I think it needs to, and that's one of the points, okay? So a lot of farmers do trust their ag suppliers, and there's a good reason. Those are the people who have direct product knowledge about the things. So it's no different than going to a computer store and asking those people what model, what does it do, what are its capabilities, how does it work, what are the drawbacks. It's important. They're an important source of information for sure. Certified crop advisors are another very important source of information. These are folks that they have a minimum requirement. They had to pass international and a local exam, and they had to prove a number of years of work experience. So that should give us some confidence in their ability to do some of these things, to investigate, to diagnose. I put crop consultants as a separate entity because there's also National Alliance of Independent Crop Consultants. They have their own certification program, and they require a minimum of 4-year degree. Currently, the certified crop advisors do not have a minimum educational requirement. It is supplanted with experience, and I would argue that both experience and education are incredibly important, hence the Doctor of Plant Health program. Because that's really what it's about. It's about adding depth of knowledge. It's adding the ability to diagnose problems accurately and then to build solutions. So this is what I see in order to get our answers that we have. I think we have many answers. But I think one of the stepping points, not the only, but one of the really important ones is the application of it. Talking to my doctor about losing weight and looking at the healthy plate on the internet. How do I do that when I travel, when I commute 500 miles, come back and forth to Nebraska? When McDonald's is quick and easy and the breakfast sandwich isn't too bad. It's a little greasy, but it's not, not too bad. Eating a salad while driving is not really a good thing. So there's some challenges in this, right? So the point of this being, and I think scouting is the paramount. It's one of the absolute hubs of what we're doing is to identify the problem. This is the assessment, and it's the head-to-toe assessment. And I don't leave this to other people. I do have people who work with me, interns who work with me that scout with me, but I don't leave it to them. I think that's a critical, key, important point of it. When you go to the doctor's office, yes, the nurse, the CNA, those people do some of the routine analysis, the blood pressure, the regular checks, but your doctor still comes in to talk to you face to face. And there's good reason for that. Why don't we use that in agriculture? Too many of the agronomists are in their office and never in the field. And I see this on a day-to-day basis, and Chris can attest to this, at how many times we see the competition out in the field. It's a rare thing. There's a lot of CAs in my neighborhood. There's a lot of agronomists. There's 25 within 30 miles of where I work. And if I see somebody else in the field twice a year, that's a big day. It's a big deal. And all of our principles are based on that. So all of the recommendations, if you have GOS as well, scout your field. Do you have corn room? Scout your field, right? This is again and again and again emphasized in all of our integrated pest management. So that's the first step. I don't think we're doing that right. I think we give it lip service. I think we talk about it. And then to be able to apply that science is the really hard part. So here we are in the conference room. And I'm a very lucky agronomist. I get some of my extension personnel. This is actually an extension researcher. She's in research. She's in the field with us. There's my farmer. And the extension education specialist is the one taking the picture. Okay. So this is a pretty good conference, and this is the place to have that conference. And I'm down on my knees digging a hole because that's where the information is. That's where the observations are. And that's where the science is going to be applied, right? And this is truly a conference. No one person is more valuable than the other. But unfortunately, my farmer, who's a very smart individual, doesn't speak nerdese, right? He doesn't speak some of these terms. So my job oftentimes is to be a translator and help him understand how to do that so that it actually can be applied, so that I can translate that research into actions. The other side of this is that we can translate farming to the researcher. How does this work? What does the machine look like? How does it work? Can you do it? Can you do it when the researcher wants you to do it? That's important. Here's my bid for why the most experienced agronomist should be in the field. 2 completely different causes. Completely different. Now, when you were students and we're taking plant nutrition, we got a pretty good guess it's going to be something nutrient, right? Probably. When you're a consultant in the field, you don't get that limitation. Neither one of these are nutrients. This one is herbicide carryover from the year before. Fomasafe and Flexstar in the soybeans. Normally it doesn't happen. The reason it happened is we had low rainfall and we had a cool fall and the breakdown was reduced. This is wind damage. There's sandblasting from wind damage through wind erosion, those 34-mile-an-hour winds that I was showing you before. Both of these plants recovered. There was no need to add a product, to put more fertilizer on, but we had to properly assess this. Had this been sulfur or nitrogen deficiency, we would have needed to do something to manage it. The only way to do that is to be in the field and to do the inspections, to dig up the plant, to get your hands in the soil. And I think it needs to be someone with experience and a depth of education in order to do that. Oftentimes when I do see the competition in the field, it's a summer intern, and I have nothing against summer interns. It's some of the greatest experience they can have. But the problem I have is they're alone. They're alone. Why do we send summer interns to the field alone? That's a bad idea. Okay? These problems are hard, and it takes a lot of information. Then you get the inevitable cell phone text from the grower. What is this and how bad is it and what do I spray on it? And this is a pretty good picture, actually. It's in focus and, it's useful. And to be honest with you, about 3 years ago, I wouldn't have had a clue what this was. I've never seen it. It's important to know what the pest is, right? Well, first, let's talk about, is it a pest? Huh? This is a tortoise beetle. It's not a pest. It's not a problem. I was able to provide that answer to that farmer within seconds. And to say, don't worry about it. It's something in the weather this year. You just happen to find it. It's one of those random events. This is what it is. It's a cool looking insect. It's kind of gnarly looking. It looks dangerous. But it's more dangerous to what's trying to eat it than other things. It's not going to injure your corn plant. So no action is needed. And that's a really important recommendation. No action is needed. Now this could be a number of things, but I'm just going to cut to the chase. This is a nutrient deficiency. It's not a nutrient availability issue as far as what's in the soil. This is iron deficiency chlorosis. Our soil is made up of percentages of iron. It's not like there's not enough iron. There's plenty of iron there. However, the pH is right around 8. Slow draining field, often waterlogged, has high nitrates, all the complicating factors. The salinity is a little higher. So we have some solutions for this, right? So we have chelated iron products that we can use. We've tried planting cover crops or companion crops to help acidify the soil, and those have been solutions. But you know what the real economic viable solution in this particular field is? Don't plant soybean. I'm serious. It's that simple. Because we have all of these complicating factors that are adding. We're not going to manipulate the soil pH down from 8 point. We're not. Changing the water, yeah, we can work on that, but that's nothing simple. That'll help manage the salinity, but that's nothing simple. Because we're talking about watershed management now, and this guy's got one field out of, a few thousand acres in the watershed. He's really not going to make a lot of difference. The answer is don't plant soybeans here. Okay, and if you look off in the distance, he can plant soybeans there. That's fine. No problem. Sometimes we ask the wrong questions. This one was a stumper. Chris is here. This took a little while. We had to go back. Oh, for all of you DPHers and future DPHers, plant water relations pays. It's a challenging course, but it pays. There's a reason for it. This is one of 2 irrigators that I have. I know irrigation is a big thing in Nebraska. I don't know a lot about irrigation because I have 2 fields, okay? I know what I need to know. It's not a lot. And so the last time that we spent a lot of time in this field, the corn was about 3 feet tall. It's the last time we can get across it with the ATV. Everything looks good. There's not a whole lot of pests to worry about. We're in good shape. We had adequate moisture. We just managed the irrigation like normal. This is the sandy soil. This is the sand lens right here. That's a big deal. And we came back a couple weeks later and the corn's this tall, tasseled out. Oh man, this is what happened? What happened? Now there's nothing we can do about it. It's tasseled out. It's just like, see what happens. And a couple weeks later, we had cobs, like good ones. They were awesome on this little pygmy corn. And Chris and I are like, what happened? The grower's like, what happened? Was there nutrient deficiency? Was it, well, the corn looks good, the cobs look good, they look fine. Well, racking your brain a little bit, you go back and you remember that the first thing to suffer with a slight loss of moisture is cell elongation. And it doesn't have a visual symptom necessarily. But the cells don't elongate quite as much. So we were at subclinical water deficiency. And yet the yield maintained. At the end of the year, the yield was less than 10% off the average. And that's actually a win because this is a lot sandier soil than the rest of it. So again, the answer was do nothing. But it's important to know the cause and the reason and what happened. So the depth of knowledge was really critical because the growers worried about doing complete soil analysis testing, spending a lot of money on plant nutrition testing. We did some testing on that, but he wanted to really delve into it and spend a lot of time and money into it. And actually the thing was we should have spun the pivot one more time. It's one of my favorite farmers, a good friend of mine, and I've worked on this farm for many years. I actually began working with his dad close to 17, 18 years ago. He was still getting high school. So Tony Wagner's been a long friend. So when I first started with him, he was a beginning farmer, which kind of means not a whole lot of money, okay? So every decision that he made was critically important, very important. And it wasn't the time of $7 corn. This is before $7 corn, so we didn't have a lot of room for error, okay? And as a beginning farmer looking for new land, the really good land wasn't up for rent. Some of the not so good land was up for rent. And that was what he could get his hands on, what he could get a hold of. So this field over here is a sandy loam field that he picked up at the beginning, and highly eroded land. Actually, the soil descriptions didn't even match the soil. We'd lost so much soil since the 50s when they did the descriptions that it wasn't even the same soil. Over 4 to 6 inches of topsoil were probably gone from that from previous managers. So what do you do with this beginning farmer? Doesn't have a whole lot of money, needs to hit some home runs so he can keep farming. Luckily for me, he's a bright individual with good ideas. And we just started managing this. We managed it for when the water was there. And in my case, the water is in North Dakota. It's an early season. So very early season through April, May, June, we have pretty good moisture. July, August, and September, not so much, okay? So when you think about that, corn and soybean is not a really good bet in this system because they need the moisture at the end of the year. Even though the markets are strongly corn and soybean focused, his equipment is strongly corn and soybean focused, on this particular field for this farmer, those were very bad choices because they're very expensive crops to put in. So we worked with what we had. We did a complete assessment on the soil. We did a complete assessment on the weather. We did an assessment on his economics. And we planted things like field peas in the end of April. And then they were done by July when the water dried out. Then we were able to add a cover crop to reduce the erosion on this and to help fight some weeds, okay? And then he later moved into buying a stripper header so that he could leave residue to improve his snow catch, to add organic matter, and actually to manage the residue in such a way that it made it easier for him to plant. These are all integrated systems. No-till starts with managing your residue off your combine. That's the first place it starts. So it's this whole systems approach. And now in this other field, not far away, it's a different field. It's completely different. Soil types are different. We're doing entirely different things. We do not put radishes on this field. We definitely put them here because we got excess moisture. We got a different type of soil. He's trying to move moisture with it. That radish is 30 days old, by the way. It's doing what we want it to do. And in that mixture, he's got some flax right by his shoe. We've got some oats in there. We've got a few other things. Those are strategically picked because his next crop rotation is going to be corn, and I don't want to deal with residual plants. So cereal rye would not fit in this particular field in this particular situation. Cereal rye is a great cover crop, and I recommend it highly, and there are reasons for that. This is cereal rye planted in a saline area. These are soybeans planted in a kochia area. And do you see where the defining line is in this picture? This is an accident. So we started with the cereal rye knowing that we needed to move water. By moving water, we can plant cereal rye in the fall, let it grow in the spring, we move water. I come out the next spring and I see this line. Mother Nature doesn't work in straight lines, folks. Circles, squares, triangles, probably man-made. I think there's something going on here. Other than he turned our sprayer on here and didn't put any pre-emerge on, which I was not happy about. And when you look a little closer, there is kochia on that CRI side. It's that big. This kochia is this big. And if you consult any herbicide label ever written, 4 inches and less. Well, I don't care what your ruler looks like. That's not 4 inches and less. Okay? It's game over, basically. It's game over. And we're able to do that with a non-herbicidal solution. This is an integrated solution. It's managing his water. It's helping to manage his salinity. It's not super expensive. And when we saw this, we went big time. Right? I need the research. I need the demographics to show that this is working, that there's allelopathic effects going on. But I don't need to wait for it to implement these solutions when I have this kind of evidence. So we went ahead with it. And this is Tony again, planting directly into headed out cereal rye from the year before. There it is in a couple of weeks. Now, the neighborhood thought he had lost his mind. He had lost his mind because this was a beautiful green cereal rye field. They're like, wow, that field looks really good. And he went in there with this huge four-wheel drive tractor, rolled it all down, planted into it, turned it on with a sprayer, killed it all off. 2 weeks later, it's just brown. And the neighborhood's like, what did you do? They're coming up to him at the elevator at the coffee shop. What did you do? What are you doing? It looks so great. What are you doing? Well, I wanted soybean on there. And they just walk away and shaking their head, not understanding. Now, if you look at this, these guys are a little bit yellow. So we've got a little bit of a carbon to nitrogen ratio issue. The rye has used up a lot of nitrogen. I'm not too worried about it because we've got a legume. Okay. I was worried at this stage because I didn't know how this was going to go. But the stand looks good. The other thing that looks good is there's not a whole lot of kochia there. And that's a really good thing when that kochia that I have is resistant to 6 or 7 modes of herbicide. I don't have a lot of herbicide solutions. That residue persisted for a long time. We got close to 2 months worth of weed control out of that residue just by being there. Plus, we reduced our erosion over the fall, and we helped manage the water. And these soybeans are very yellow. They're very yellow. They are nitrogen stressed. However, the lucky thing for me was that he thought he'd ran out of seed right before he did. He had 1 round left in this field to plant the CRI. And what happened is you check the tank and you lift the lid, and if you don't get the lid locked, it loses air pressure. It can be closed, but it's not locked. And that air pressure is critically important in order to push the seed through the tubes. So what happens is he didn't have air pressure. He gets in, he goes for a little while, the tube's empty, the monitor says you're empty. Okay, well, that was close. I knew it was close. Took a look, drives out on the field, goes down the road, goes, I wonder if that lid's closed. Stops, gets out on the road, looks, nope, lid's not closed. There's at least another round with a CRI in there. Well, my roads are not big enough to turn around that piece of equipment. Luckily for him, there was a field right there. So he planted into that other field. So I had a minus check strip and a plus check strip within a half a mile. And I would do that every time if possible. Okay? Huge visual differences in this situation. These soybeans were shorter by at least a foot towards August, and they had been yellow the whole year. That row that he didn't plant into, you can kind of see it over here. It was much taller, it was green, beautiful, looks great. Same thing is true in the other field, other than it's just the inverse of it, right? And he's worried. Because he needs to be. Because he needs to make the economics work. This wild idea of planting soybeans in rye might not be such a good idea if I can't make the economics work, right? So we went out and we looked at these soybeans and we counted. One of the first things that we found is that the internode spacing between the pods here is about this much. The internode spacing where he didn't plant the CRI is about this much. Now, if you've ever done yield estimates on soybeans, you understand that counting pods is a futile effort. However, it gives you an idea of about where you're at. And we got similar numbers. The lucky thing for me is that his equipment matches up pretty good. So around with his planter matched up really well with his combine. So we were able to look at his yield monitor and see that there really wasn't any yield difference. There was no loss. The only thing that was a loss was we had a lot less kochia. We had a lot better weed control. And we continue to do this. But we don't do this on sandy ground where we need the moisture. We do something different. This is that sandy ground, the one field that he first brought. This is the one that was highly eroded. The organic matter was under 1%. Yeah, and this is a gorgeous picture, folks. This is 12 years later. There was no structure when we first moved on this field, and there's beautiful structure now. There's lots of root growth, and there's actually some dark color in this soil that didn't exist. Now we've moved the needle on the organic matter by about 0.4%, but that's a big deal. We've changed the structure, and his integration, his systems thinking has increased the water holding capacity to last longer throughout the season. That's really critical. And this is not a normal picture from North Dakota. This is a section. There's a lot of sections in the area. The no trees is normal. Okay, that's common. But if you look at this, there's lots of weird shapes. None of this is square. This is a square section. My roads are every mile, they're square. They're flat, they're square. That's like where the roads are. And there's a jagged edge over here and a corner there and cut out in here. And so what's going on? We've diagnosed what's going on in these fields, at least tried to. And we're fitting customized solutions to it. It's fine to plant corn here. Corn works really well here. It does not work there. Salinity and water problems, so we didn't put corn there. This is a saline area that's often flooded out, and there's actually standing water in there now. This hasn't been in regular corn and soybean production for almost 9 years. We've been growing cereal rye, oats, and other forages in this situation. Here's where he's growing his soybeans, and here's a strip of barley because it's way more saline tolerant. This is a nightmare. This is a literal nightmare for herbicide management, for fertility management, but it's not impossible, okay? And this is the point of why I think the highly trained person needs to be in the field, making these assessments and helping the grower hand and fist. And why your meetings, your conference meetings need to be in the field, because here we're able to plant barley into these situations where soybeans would be dead. Remember that picture I showed you? There was no soybeans on that? This would be the same thing. Why plant that? Here we have barley. Reduce the fertility. We get clever and you plant dicamba soybean, and guess what? Dicamba is also labeled on barley. So there's no kochia between the border. There's no drift on that border. The plants are not dead. But it takes the knowledge to be able to do that. So he was able to make this, instead of a negative economic, to make it into a zero or a positive economics. Not much, but it's better than a negative. Same is true here. And he's taking advantage of the soils that can produce corn and to do it well. There's a lot more management. This is very challenging for the grower to pull this off. The timing that he needs to be out here for each one of these crops is very different. This is one of the challenges to implementing our strategies. We have answers, but the logistics are really important. This is just a glamour shot. This is his farm. And his dad's in this combine. He's over here, and the hired man's running the grain cart. This is soybean harvest. I love the beautiful lines. And if you notice, every tree has a purpose. They're all in straight lines. They're all planted about the same time. They're all about the same species. And they're all suffering similar fates, including death and neglect, disease, and such. But they had purposes. And I'm trying to get our growers to reintroduce new trees. There's a barren area where they're just dead here. They're not serving their purpose any longer, and they get frustrated with them. But that tree has a purpose, has a very important ecological purpose in this system. I'm trying to get them to take these out and put in new ones. That's fine. We must be doing something a little bit right. That's Tony right there, and you might recognize a beard. That's the current issue of Crops and Soils magazine. The point of this whole thing is that for me, sustainability is a lot more than crop production. Feeding 9 billion people is something different. I don't know those people. I don't know who they are. I don't know who they're going to be. I know this family. And I want to be here for the third generation. So, I believe that the solutions to these grand challenges are small. Their little implementation. I believe we have a lot of the answers. I know we need more science, but I believe we have a lot of the answers. But we need to help each other. We need to be able to do it. We need to be able to teach people how it works, how it fits, and how you can do it on your farm in this field today. And to plan for the next 10 years, the next 50 years, and the next generation. That's what I have. And by the way, folks, especially you old, crusty, married men, if you've never been to a concert with your wife, take her. Looking at you, Tom. It was well worth it. That was Ed Sheeran, and I'd never heard any of his songs other than two. I'm not even making this up. I'd only heard two of his songs, and that was Ed Sheeran. She's like, I really want to go. I'm like, fine, I'll go. So here we are. We're at this concert, and he knows it, right? Ed knows it. He's like, gets up. So all you husbands and boyfriends that really didn't want to be here, I hope you're enjoying it. It was one of the best concerts I've ever been to in my life. The guy's amazing, and it's the safest place to take your wife because you will enjoy it. So go. I welcome any questions, comments, discussion. Oh.
I have a lot of friends who are probably second or third generation out of farming, but have family farms.
For sure.
So they live in Lincoln. Their farms are in South Dakota, Western Nebraska. They are absolutely reliant on the renter.
Yeah.
They personally have very little knowledge.
Right. What do we do?
Yeah, I mean, what is it? How much land most farms are what is it now?
The average farm size?
50%, 50% is.
There's a
is
significant,
rented,
significant amount of rented land.
Yeah,
And there's a significant generational gap, 2 to 3 generations actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's a loss of that association with the land.
they're not being rented to people like your friend Tony Wagner.
Well, they might be, but they may not have that connection with him. Okay, so Tony does go out of his way to communicate with his landowners. He needs to because he's doing things that are very different. Okay, they're controversial. These things are controversial in these areas. Understand, folks, that even just because you know that these things work in science, we've proven it for decades. Like, why aren't these farmers using it? This is controversial. This is change. This is different. Do you want to be the one who's different? How much does it take? Had I come in a t-shirt and jeans today, what would have happened? I wear that every day to school. That's not the expectation. So expectations are important, okay? So Tony goes out of his way to communicate with his landowners, to educate them as much as they're willing to accept. This is the next thing. We have to understand that people are only going to go so far. They're only going to go so far. So that being able to communicate those solutions at the appropriate level without undershooting, never undershoot somebody's intelligence. That's the first way to make an enemy. But to communicate that, this is what we're doing to protect the land. This is our goal for the next 10 years. This is my goal for my son, to rent it from your son. I think that's the first place to start. But he has to be educated enough in order to understand that vision, and I think that's my job. My job is to take the science, process it, and deliver it. There were a few more questions. I hope that answers.
Thank you, Lee, for your presentation. My first part is a comment. I think it's a paradigm shift not only for crop advisors in how we do extension pedagogy. It's a lesson for the university as well in how we do extension in the way you described how crop advisors would do. The other component, and I don't know if you've thought about that, as you're in the field diagnosing issues and looking, into the entire system, some issues may not have a solution, but I think closing the loop in terms of generating questions that we as a university need to do as a purpose-driven research questions would be valuable. So you diagnose, you don't have the solution, but I think you bring the solution or the questions back to the academic institution so we could do research that matters rather than follow the money. So we could address stakeholders. So that's my comment. So in that process, it needs to be included in thinking of how can we address the questions that we don't have answers for. My third comment, it's a question in that field where you showed a portion of the land is sand lenses, and you had a difference in yield 10%, I believe is what you stated. So if you are looking at the system entirely, how much nitrogen are you losing below the root, and how much nitrogen are you losing as a greenhouse gas? Because if we're looking at accounting, then we need to look at not just yield, but everything else that comes from that system.
Absolutely.
So you can
agree.
address that question.
Yeah, I'd like to address both, actually. I have honestly thought a lot about that, and I did write a section, I just didn't put it into the talk, about the role of the crop advisor from the middle up. We often talk about these solutions from the bottom being the applied person, and there's no derogatory term from the bottom, but that's where the rubber hits the road, right? The farmer is where it's doing, and the researcher is at the top bringing the information. And I'm in the middle is where I consider myself. And so I do that, I try to do that, and this is one of the things that I need to really be encouraged in the system, is for the field agronomist to take note, to recognize these things and bring those questions to the researcher. And also to bring the complications of the logistics of the farm to the researcher. Because I think there's a disconnect often when the researcher does something given their limitations. And the farmer looks at, well, that's not how I do it. I don't even understand. So we do talk about that for sure.
More in his doctoral document.
And I forgot
today.
the third part. What was the third part? For sure. Well, and that's the next step for me. So part of this is it takes time to move the needle. Change is difficult. And those are things that we need to do. In that particular field, I really would like to have a different crop in that area in a different way and using it. That grower's not particularly ready for that, but we can move in that direction. However, we can improve our nitrogen management, and we're doing that with, split addressing nitrogen, top dressing it, just changing the yield goal to be more appropriate for what we're putting out there. And those things are important. Tom.
Okay, so I am at this moment trying to fit your small solutions summary there into the sort of dichotomy that you presented in the beginning between problem-based solutions. I think that's what you call it. Yeah, problem-based solutions versus systems-based solutions.
Right.
Because it seems to me that what you have just described or what you embody actually is a highly integrated, literally embody. I mean, you've got all this information, which is actually essentially the same thing as positions that are called, complex systems analysis, predicting the unpredictable and all that sort of stuff. Now, let me put this into a real world situation. I'm on a committee and we're trying to hire a person in a complex systems. We've got money for a position. However, we're kind of arguing about what we want. Do we want a plant epidemiologist who is going to be focusing on the sort of the problem that's, individual problems? Or do we want somebody that's on the other end of the spectrum that is familiar with all the ways that you can sort of model and simulate and put all this information together, including climate change, environment, and social factors, in addition to the plant pathogens and the genomics? How do we as a university start to try to hire people that are doing what you're describing here?
Wow. So my first thing is to find that type of diversity is going to be a huge challenge, because so many people are trained in specialty. And there's nothing wrong with specialty. It's critically important to have specialty. I would offer up, and this is traditional consulting, rather than answer your question, I would offer up a solution you didn't even mention. Build a team. Build a team. And so my point of this is I think you may have modelers available to you. You may have plant physiologists available to you. But do you have that person who's getting the data, the actual observations, the infield? Do they have the communication capabilities? That might be a better team. So rather than, I think, looking for one individual, it would be nice to have a broad individual, but I think they're in short supply. You can build a team and get a surrogate that way too. So the hiring of the one individual would serve a purpose in that system. I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. I'm challenging others because I don't see this type of thought process commonly. I don't see this systems-based thing commonly, and I don't think it's that difficult. I think there are so many people completely capable of doing it. I'm challenging people to just move up to that level. It doesn't answer your question at all.
Any additional questions? If not, let's give Lee one more round.
This is a cool little town in Missouri, by the way. If you ever get there, it's pretty beautiful.
One thing I just want to indicate, I was going to mention this in the introduction, but I guess I kind of breezed on past it. But again, Lee comes to us with a significant amount of credibility. I think the second year he was in the program, or the first year he was in the program, he was awarded the national, or the NAICC, National Association of Independent Crop Consultants.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah. He was awarded their Consultant of the Year award. And actually later that same year, he was awarded the International CCA Advisor of the Year award. Those are both national, international awards. So his expertise has been recognized well beyond 269 plant science. I think in that room, he has served an awfully important purpose as well, transferring his knowledge to many of the other students in the program. So thank you, Lee, and look forward to more.
I have one unanswered question yet, right? Why did I go back to school? I believe what I told you folks. I believe what I just presented. And I believe that leadership is best witnessed by action. I have gained an incredible amount of knowledge. I've been able to apply it. And the wealth of family that I've gained is wonderful as well. So, thanks. Didn't want to leave that question hanging. Hopefully you weren't nervous, because you didn't even see it.
No, it was fine. I knew, I had confidence. I got a text quarter way through it from Jeff Bradshaw. That's love.
Uh-huh.
So this is amazing. Can't wait for the recording. So.
Cool. Cool. Hey, Tom.
Appreciate it.